name is Mark and I am the local disaster tour guide, and welcome to a journey through, I guess I should be honest up front, something rather different for my channel today. Today I'm going to be talking about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I knew I wanted to do something on this channel to highlight and talk about mental health. I feel like it's an important topic, and I feel like it's a discussion that a lot of people could use. So I knew I wanted to do something on this channel. And for the last couple of months, I've been kicking around all kinds of different ideas about how I could highlight mental health issues and talk about this aspect of storytelling or that aspect of storytelling. But I finally just settled on the idea of telling a story of mental health, my story. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about my mental health journey, some of the important events that have affected me on my journey, and some of the things I have found on my journey that have been helpful to me. And I'm offering this story in hope that maybe for someone who encounters this video, that it can encourage you to take some positive steps towards healing and hope in your own mental health journey. Now don't worry, this channel is still very much a nerdy, geeky, let's talk about TTRPGs channel. And next week, I promise to be right back at it with my usual Pathfinder 2e content. Right now, the two videos that I am scripting and working on are my review of Lost Omens Firebrands and also my classic introductions video for the Summoner class. Of the two, I would expect Firebrands will probably come first just because that's easier to crank out. But I promise you, there is more nerdy content coming, and that will be right back on the docket next week. But for today, I wanted to do a serious conversation and talk about my mental health journey, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who probably could use some help, but maybe don't know where or how to start. Now, there are a few things I want to say up front before I dive into the content of this video. Number one, I am not a licensed therapist. Now, because of some of the work I do in real life, I am frequently part of care teams for people. I will sometimes say that I am mental health adjacent or therapy adjacent in some of the work that I do, because I am often called in to address specific situations or to be part of a particular team. But my role is not and has never been to be a therapist. And I definitely want to say clearly at the start of this that you should not take anything I say in this video as the advice of a therapist. And I would strongly encourage you, if you're having mental health issues, to seek out a therapist and the professional advice that they can give you. I go to a therapist. There is nothing shameful about going to a therapist. And my relationship with my therapist has done a great deal to help me with many of the traumas that I faced in my life. Still, as someone who has seen some pretty heavy things, and as someone who has walked alongside people as they deal with heavy things, I imagine that my story can probably touch upon some of the heavier moments in your story, so that's why I share what I do. Another thing I'm going to say up front is, in this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the fact that I am a religious person. Now, I would not consider this video to be a particularly religious video, and longtime viewers of this channel probably know that in real life, among the various jobs that I do, I serve both as a chaplain and pastor. So the simple truth is I am a religious person. Now, this is very much a hobby channel, so usually I'm on here talking about nerdy stuff, and that part of my life doesn't come up, but just be aware that talking about my mental health journey is going to bring up some aspects of my spiritual journey, and that will be part of the conversation in this video. I know that I have a fantastic community here on YouTube, so I'm not truly that worried about people responding negatively to that, but it is a difference in tone from the normal work that I put out. So I just want you to be aware that the conversation is going to be a little bit different here. And then the final thing that I feel like I should say is, in the last part of this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that have really helped me personally on my mental health journey. But there's an important trick with any advice that you receive that I think is important to bear in mind, which is look for the healthy medium. You can take almost any kind of advice or any particular tactic and push that idea too far and cause that idea to become unhealthy. In ancient philosophy, Aristotle referred to what he called the golden mean, which is the virtue that exists between the extremes of various vices. To him, virtue was about finding that balance so that you avoided the catastrophic extremes. And I think anytime that you ask for advice, seek advice, or receive advice, that it's healthy to look through the advice through the lens of that golden mean, if you will. The goal, ultimately, is to find whatever it is that helps you achieve that balance, helps achieve that state of equilibrium or peace where you can be healthy and whole and operate effectively day by day. But with that out of the way, let me talk a little bit about my story and some of the struggles I've had with my mental health. So, a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed as having an anxiety disorder. It's been a little over 2 years since I got the official diagnosis, but in working with a therapist and going through some of the traumas and different issues that I've dealt with, it eventually came out and I eventually received a full and formal diagnosis that I have an anxiety disorder. Now, here's the thing. I turned 40 this year. But the portion of my mind that is overactive when my anxiety is in full force, the portion of my mind, the things that my mind does when that anxiety is causing me problems, I honestly cannot remember a point in my life where those things weren't true. When I think back to some of the earliest memories I have, being in kindergarten and first grade, and some of the things that were going on when I was a very, very small child, those same thought processes, those same perceptions, those same ways of seeing the world were there. Anxiety is something I have been carrying my entire life, and it wasn't until just a couple of years ago that someone finally looked at me and said, "Hey Mark, you have an anxiety disorder. That's not normal, and this is something that needs to be treated." And honestly, that conversation was actually a good conversation for me. That conversation finally snapped so many things in my life into focus, and so many things that hadn't made sense for years. Suddenly I knew what was really going on. One of the things that I know to be true about myself, it has been true so long I honestly don't even remember when I first recognized this, but I can have panic attacks if I am in a crowd of people that includes more than 5 people. Seriously. If there are more than 5 other people in a room, my brain is automatically in anxiety mode. It can be people that I like, I can be doing things that I love, it can be in an environment that is completely familiar to me, but if you put me in a crowded situation, my brain is immediately on high alert, and that has always been true. By the way, rushing the dealer hall at Gen Con, not a good idea for me. Yeah, I learned that one the hard way. First time I went to Gen Con, my friends were like, "Mark, you gotta rush dealer hall first thing in the morning. That's the most important thing to do at Gen Con." I do not do that anymore. I do not hit the dealer hall until after lunch, and I do it slowly on my own terms. But seriously, for my entire life, if I have been in a crowd of people, I have been in a situation where I am coping with anxiety and where there is a very real chance that I could have a panic attack. And the thing is, when I was growing up, even though this was a very real part of what I was dealing with, even though I know I told people about this, it just kind of got played off and no one ever took it seriously, to the point that, I don't know, I thought maybe what I was going through was normal. I came to a point where I thought, I guess everybody's about to have a panic attack all the time. I feel like that statement should be obviously not true, but when no one affirms that something is off, it's easy to get into a state where you're like, okay, I guess this is normal. And so I went through my life never really dealing with these anxieties or these problems, and I got really good at just avoiding any kind of stressor because I knew the panic attacks were too real. When I was in high school, there were people who genuinely thought I could not speak. There's actually a story about halfway through my high school career that my best friend introduced me to his new girlfriend, and his new girlfriend was genuinely shocked that I could speak. She had had several classes with me, and I never spoke, I never interacted with people, and so she thought I was effectively incapable of speaking. It genuinely shocked her. By the time I got to high school, I was really good at being invisible, I was really good at hiding, and I was really good at just slinking away from social situations as fast as I could, because that was really the only coping strategy that I had. And sort of the first big event in my mental health journey that set me on a better course, though certainly this was a rocky start, was when I had to respond to a friend attempting suicide. When I was in the 11th grade, I had a friend that attempted suicide. Thankfully, the attempt was not successful, but that moment was the closest I had ever come to the issue of suicide, and this was a person who was extremely close to me, and that was a situation where I knew for certain I couldn't run from it. This was the first social situation where someone I cared about was, their well-being was on the line, and so I sort of had to step up. And here I was, a high schooler who wasn't even dealing with his own issues, but I was trying to help my friend with their issues because I wanted them to get better. That series of events with that particular friend was a very important turning point in my life. That event is actually one of the main reasons that I ended up becoming a pastor down the road. Helping my friend work their way through that trauma revealed to me that I care for people and that helping people and caring for people is important to me. And that was an important first step in what would later become one of the most important parts of my life. I saw a friend in need and I wasn't sure what to do, but I was going to try to do something, and so I read and panicked and read some more and panicked some more and just tried to be there for my friend, and thankfully they worked their way through their issues and they're doing incredibly well today. But I kind of look at what my friend went through in high school as a blessing in disguise, because in helping my friend and in doing everything I could to be there for my friend, it was the first time I really began to take seriously what was going on in my own mind and in my own world. Now, after that happened, I went on into college, and I had many opportunities actually to walk alongside people and help them in various situations. And for a very long time, I was very much a helper to anyone and everyone that I could. Helping people was important to me, and being able to step in and care for someone who was going through a rough time, it was something I valued. But little did I know that in large part what I was doing to help other people was ultimately going to be important for myself, because there was an event that was coming my way where honestly I was going to need help. Towards the end of my college career, I went through a nightmarish financial scenario. I won't tell you the whole story because honestly the whole story would be way too long to tell. Basically, I got hit by some fraudsters that did some incredibly severe financial damage to me, which in and of itself would have been pretty bad, but on top of that, it messed up my financial aid for college, which caused me to get dropped from my program for a while, which led to other financial complications, and it just kind of created this gigantic financial whirlpool that I couldn't escape from because, well, I hadn't graduated yet. I was in the middle of this massive mess that I didn't even fully understand what was going on. It ended up taking me almost 8 years to clean up the entire mess that was created by those criminals. But that very first year, when I was first discovering what happened and when I was watching all of the dominoes fall in my life and was just panicking because everything was crumbling around me, I remember for the first time in my life moving beyond my normal anxiety to I began to have dreams about committing suicide. There were two very major ones that hit me very hard and that I struggled with very deeply during that season. I'm not going to dive into the deep specifics of what I went through, but for the first time in my life, here I was, an adult, my life was collapsing around me, and I got stuck in that place where you can't find a way out, you don't know what to do, and your brain starts to panic, and you don't want to consider it, but you start thinking about that most permanent solution that's not actually a solution. I was staring down, at least in some ways, the same fears and frustration and panic that my friend in high school had gone through, and thankfully for me, because I had seen my friend in high school heal and had walked alongside them as they were healing, that gave me just enough knowledge to know what to look for. I knew who to call, I knew how to ask for help, and though I didn't know how to fix my problems, I knew how to at least put up the safeguards so that I could establish enough peace in my life to give myself time to find a solution. And that was really the best I could do then. One of the things that I've contemplated over the last couple of years is just how terrifying that situation is when I look at it through hindsight. Here I was, a person with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder, being hit with what was a severely traumatic incident, and honestly, if I hadn't known how to ask for help in that moment, I fear what could have happened to me. Thankfully, I had good friends who rallied around me and helped me through that time, and it took me a while to find the solution to my financial problems and to fix the mess that those criminals caused. But I got my life back together and things started moving in a better direction again. But I would be lying if I said that that is the only time in my life that I have ever struggled with suicidal ideation. Being truthful, 2 years ago, I was struggling with suicidal ideation. If you've been watching this channel for a long time, you probably know that a couple of years ago, I had a freak allergic reaction to a medicine that I was prescribed. And it was one of those like crazy rare 1 in a million cases. Doctors basically never see this kind of thing. It's literally the doctor who figured out what was going on with me had just gone to a conference about my particular condition the month before, and that was the only reason he recognized it. But a couple of years ago, I had a severe allergic reaction to a medicine. I came dangerously close to losing my life to it, honestly, and it did severe damage to my nerves all over my body. I would estimate that I lost somewhere between 75 to 80% of the use of my arms and legs, and I still have a lot of residual issues from that medical emergency that I went through. Longtime viewers of this channel may remember there was a time that I did these videos standing up and, well, now I'm seated. But that wasn't just a physical problem when I went through that. It was a physical nightmare having to deal with all of the medical complications I was having. And I remember at one point hoping that the doctors came back to me and said I had cancer, because at least it would have been an answer. Like, it was a nightmarish situation, but the emotional turmoil of that time was really terrible as well. This all happened close to the time that my son was turning 1 year old. And I remember my 1 year old son looking up at me and going, "Up, up." And I couldn't pick him up because it wasn't safe. And that was devastating for me. And when I was going through all of that, being honest, the suicidal ideation came back to me for a phase. When the doctors didn't know what was going on, and when I didn't know if I was going to heal, there was a portion of my mind that went back to some of those dark places that I had been towards the end of my college career, where I began to wonder if there was even a way out of all of this. And again, I found myself in a situation where I kind of had to use those skills that I used to help others to help myself, to call in resources and call people to help me, and just look for ways to get through that whole mess. And as part of that, I was working with a new therapist who was helping me kind of cope with all of that turmoil. And it came out in those conversations that I was dealing with some anxiety. But as we unpacked that anxiety, my therapist and I quickly realized that the anxiety that I was dealing with wasn't contained to what I was dealing with 2 years ago, that it was something that I had fought my entire life. And so, again, as sort of a strange blessing in disguise, this medical catastrophe of a bad allergic reaction to a medicine turned into an important moment where it helped me to discover that there was something deeper going on, and that I had this anxiety issue that I needed help with. So that's just a small glimpse into my story and my journey when it's come to my mental health. And I'm sure you can imagine that I'm obviously leaving a lot of things out of that story. Those details were the very broad strokes of some of the things I've gone through. But I suspect in sharing that story that I have probably touched upon things that some people watching this video may also have gone through. Your story may not be identical to mine, but I suspect that there are some people hearing this video who have wrestled with similar things. And another thing I can say is my journey is ongoing. I'm recording this video on a Thursday, and I am scheduled to meet with my therapist again this coming Monday. I have a very regular routine that I go through as part of trying to cope with different things that are going on with my life and trying to get to a better place physically and mentally and emotionally. Mental health is a journey, and I am very much a traveler who still has a long way to go. But for those of you who may be on a similar journey, I thought I would share a few things that have helped me on my journey. And as I said earlier, remember to look at these things through the lens of the golden means. This is about finding the right balance for you, and what works for me on my journey may not work the same way for you, and that's okay. Obviously, I am a spiritual person, I am a religious person, and my faith community is a big part of my mental health walk and how I keep myself healthy. And I realize that not everybody has the best relationship with the church, so that's not going to be a panacea cure-all for everyone who might be struggling with mental health issues. But hopefully some of the things that have helped me can at least inspire you to look at your situation a little differently. The first piece of advice that I have is this: you know when something is wrong. I was diagnosed with anxiety just a little over 2 years ago. I'm almost 40, and going back to when I was 4 or 5 years old, the anxiety was there. Now I have a name for it. But for well over 3 decades of my life, I didn't. I knew something was wrong. I knew I had a problem. I came up with strategies to cope with that problem. But one of the big issues in my life is, on so many occasions, I would try to tell people that I felt like something was wrong. I would try to tell people I was having trouble, and they would brush those concerns to the side. You're okay, you're going to be okay, it's not that big a deal, don't worry. And so many people played off the concerns that I had that I just began to think, okay, I guess this is normal, and I guess this is just what I have to deal with. And I hate the fact that I had to go through several major traumas in my life before a therapist actually looked at me and said, "You have an anxiety disorder." To this day, I wonder how many parts of my life would have been different if I had known about my anxiety disorder when I was young. There are so many skills that I've just started unlocking in the last few years of my life that if I had had them when I was a teenager, when I was going through college, different things like that, I feel like I could have handled so many things so much better and been in a better place to help others. And all of that experience has really taught me I knew the truth. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know how to describe it at the time, but I knew something was there. And because I let other people talk me out of that, I didn't get help. I've changed that. Early on in the medical catastrophe 2 years ago, my therapist discovered that I have an anxiety disorder, and he began to work with me on treating that anxiety disorder. But one of the things I learned in that moment was, hey, I've been right, and I need to speak up when I know something to be true. I was still going through that medical mystery. It took many, many months for my doctors to figure out exactly what happened to me when I had that allergic reaction. But the thing is, about a month into that whole ordeal, I remember thinking, I'm pretty sure that I have nerve damage. I'm pretty sure my nerves are messed up. Because my condition was so rare, nerve damage wasn't even on the radar for my doctors, and so my doctors kept brushing that concern aside. They kept saying, no, it's not nerve damage, that doesn't happen, the medicine you're on doesn't do that, no, that's ridiculous. And because of what I had learned about my anxiety, I didn't give up. I felt like, no, I've worked with people with disabilities. I know what nerve damage looks like. I know nerve damage is weird in this circumstance, but I really think this is nerve damage. And I forced my doctors to run the test, and sure enough, nerve damage. I knew something was wrong, and because I was brave enough to speak up about it, even when people were telling me it was ridiculous, I found my solution sooner. My recovery would have taken so much longer and could have been so much worse if I hadn't been willing to speak up for what I knew was true. If you are struggling with mental health issues, speak up. And if people aren't taking you seriously, keep speaking up. Now, I don't want to beat up on the people that surrounded me. A lot of people don't know how to cope with people who are experiencing mental health struggles. And a lot of people who say things like, oh, you're okay, they mean well. They don't intend to push something terrible to the side. It's sort of just this accidental byproduct of weird social habits. But if you know that something is going on, if you know that there is a struggle with your mental health, speak up, ask for help, and when necessary, ask for help again and again and again. You are worth being well. The next thing that I want to say is grief is a good thing. Now, this is something that kind of comes from my experience as a pastor. As a pastor, I get called to the bedside when people are sick, when people are dying, and I get called in when a family has lost somebody. I see a lot of people in some of their last moments, and I deal with grief head on in a lot of circumstances. And one thing that I have observed that is very common is people don't know how to handle grief, so they run from it. Now, the full scope of how to properly handle grief is well beyond what I could talk about in this video, but something that I tell a lot of people as a pastor and as a minister is this: grief is a good thing because it's honest. When I grieve, I am expressing that something was valuable and that I have lost something valuable. When I had that financial catastrophe years ago that messed up my college plans, it also ended up messing up some work opportunities for me. I thought I was going to graduate, and so I was going to go into these particular work opportunities, and I had these big crazy dreams for my life, what I thought I was going to be doing. And when that financial catastrophe happened, it stole those dreams from me. That life that I could have lived died because of those criminals. And it was several years before I realized I need to grieve that. I need to admit I lost something, and that it is okay to hurt and be sorrowful, and to admit that what happened was heavy and was difficult. Grief is honesty, but too often we take our grief, and this may be especially true of men in our society, but women can do this too. A lot of times we take our grief and we stuff it down inside of ourselves, and we try to snuff it out, and we try to pretend it's not there. And the reality is, when you try to bury grief, it's always going to escape, but when it escapes, it's going to come out ugly. I've seen enough grieving families, I've seen enough grieving people, I've seen enough people go through traumatic things and not grieve to know that burying those emotions is going to come back to haunt you. So, if you are struggling with mental health issues, there are going to be areas of your life you are going to need to grieve, but that's okay. Now, there's a process, and there's a healthy way to grieve, and I would strongly encourage you to talk to a therapist and learn some healthy ways to grieve, but don't be afraid of grief. That is an important part of your mind and body healing from the things you have gone through. Another thing that is very important to realize, and this is something that an introvert talking to other introverts on the internet probably doesn't want to be true, but it is true, and that is you need people in your life. You need them. This is another one of those insights where I think that religion has contributed a lot of positive things to people in the idea of building communities, in building places where people come together and have strong and powerful bonds and can support one another through the various events and traumatic things that go on in life. Now, obviously, religion is not the only place you can build community. I've got an amazing community of people that talk to me about nerdy Pathfinder stuff here on YouTube. You can find community a lot of places, but community is important. We need people in our lives. And for someone with severe social anxiety, that's a hard pill to swallow, but it has been true. On both of the occasions that I have found myself struggling with suicidal ideation, part of the reason that I was able to get through those things as quickly and effectively as I did was because I knew, hey, I need people around me. I've been on the care team, supporting the person dealing with those issues, so I know the importance of having a team. And when I came to those issues, I knew I had to find a team and find them fast. Now, when I say that you need people in your life, I do think there are two ways that you can mess this advice up, so I want to address them really quickly. Number one is having the wrong people in your life. If you have people who are going to tear you down, if you have people who are going to insult you, belittle you, or sabotage your efforts to get healthy, that's destructive. And there have been people in my life where I have had to put up specific barriers, and unfortunately there have been a few people in my life where I've had to say, for a time or possibly permanently, I'm sorry, but I'm severing our relationship, because I know it is important to have people that are going to support me and build me up and care for me and not tear me down. We need people in our life, but we should be careful, because if you bring the wrong people in, their influence will be detrimental. The other way that you can mess this up is some people hear you need people in your life and they translate it as you need a person in your life. And let me just say this, one person can't help you. At least one person can't help you in all the ways that you need help. My therapist is obviously a major person in my team that helps me on my mental health journey, and they do a lot. My wife is another person that I am extremely close to, and she does a lot to help me. And I have a few other close friends that I can go to that also help me with some pretty heavy stuff. But none of those people, not even my wife, is responsible for the whole thing. And I kind of look at it this way. If I'm not strong enough to carry the load by myself, there's no one person that's going to be strong enough to help carry the load with me. Rather, I need to find people. I need to find a group of people. I need to find a team of people. And my therapist can help me with this. My wife can help me with that. And my other friend can help me with this issue. And taken together, they create an environment where the various things I'm struggling with can be effectively managed. If I tried to put it all on one person, it'd crush them. But if I look to a group of people, I have enough help. I think a lot of people who have mental health struggles try to turn their romantic partner into that load bearer. They try to throw all the weight onto one person who loves them, only to find out that that weight was never meant for one person. If you have mental health issues, you need a team. Start looking for the right people to bring into your life that you can call upon, one person for this, one person for that, that collectively, taken together, can help you get to a more stable place. The fourth piece of advice that I have if you're struggling with mental health is going to seem a little counterintuitive, and this is probably going to be one of those items where even if you try to do this, you may not be able to do a lot at first, but this is something that I have seen over and over through my life that has helped me with the different struggles, and I call it the charity principle. There's a quote attributed to Jesus that simply says, "It is better to give than to receive." I genuinely believe there's a portion inside all of us that is just naturally pointed towards helping other people. But just the idea that something I have done made somebody's day better helps my mental state in powerful, powerful ways. Now, I am a workaholic who has way too many jobs, so in addition to everything else I've mentioned in this video, I also work at the local high school. Recently, one of my students came up to me and specifically told me that their handwriting has gotten a lot better, and they attributed their success in being able to write more clearly to me. The student literally came up one day and, unprompted, gave me credit for helping them learn to write. And that felt amazing. Like, I was on cloud nine for a couple of days when that happened. The idea that I had given some of my life to helping them with a particular thing, and then having them turn around and say, "Thank you, Mark, that really helped," that did wonders for me. This is why things like career are so important. When we go to work, we're not just getting a paycheck, but we're actually going and helping people. Like, any job that you do is ultimately helping people in one fashion or another. You are serving other people, and you are, at least hopefully, making their day better and developing a mindset of, you know what? I'm going to do something for somebody else. I'm going to give something to somebody else. I'm going to use religious terminology here, I'm going to bless somebody. That helps me. Knowing that I've made a difference in some small way really and truly changes my mental state and brings me to a brighter place. Here recently, I had a video on this channel that was a little bit different from my normal content, and honestly, the video didn't do that well. The numbers, the analytics, the stuff that you see on the back end as a content creator, the numbers just weren't that good, and that happens sometimes. As a content creator, sometimes you put something out into the world and your audience is like, yeah, not our thing. And I wasn't really upset that the video did poorly, but you know, kind of in the back of my mind, I just had this mentality of, okay, maybe I won't try something like that in the future. But then, a few days later, a comment appeared on that video. One of the people watching the video said, "Hey, thank you for doing this. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you so much." And guess what? That's my favorite video I've published all year. Like, yes, analytically speaking, it's one of my lowest performing videos of the year. And in terms of building this channel, it's hardly a drop in the bucket. But in terms of what this channel means to me, that comment captures the essence of why I do this channel. Why do I get on here and talk about my favorite hobby? Well, it's because I want to help people learn this hobby. And so having someone say, "Mark, your video helped me," that was amazing. Now, for everyone watching this video, when you are stuck in the middle of a mental health crisis, it's hard to believe that you can help somebody. You don't feel like you can help yourself. How can you help somebody else? And to that I would say, sometimes the only help you can do is small. But be deliberate about it. If you can't do much, do what you can, and then pay attention to what happens. Because I've discovered that the act of giving and being charitable, the act of helping, is truly powerful. And when you see it happen, it really does something amazing for your mind. The final piece of advice that I want to talk about, and this is something that you're going to hear if you have mental health struggles. People are going to tell you this. They're going to tell you it gets better. And as someone who has been through some pretty serious mental health issues, and as someone who has helped people walk through some pretty serious mental health issues, it does get better. But when you're standing in the middle of the storm, it's hard to know how that can be true. The financial catastrophe I mentioned, I was watching everything in my life fall apart because of that terrible thing that those criminals did. And watching everything fall, it was hard to believe anything could get better. Now, obviously, I'm in a better place today. And I do think it's important to have hope when it comes to mental health struggles and many issues like this. I do think that hope is a key ingredient of getting through these things. But in particular, how does the brighter tomorrow happen? And my answer to that is small wins become major victories. You can't always fight every fight that's going on around you. There are going to be storms in your life that are bigger than you. And when you're facing those storms, sometimes the best thing you can do is say, if I can't win this fight now, I'm going to go over here and deal with that. And when I'm done with that, I'll check back in on this storm and see where it's at. Solving the financial catastrophe that the criminals created really boiled down to me solving several small issues, and I would check back in on the big issue, and frequently it was worse, but I would deal with these small issues, and then after a while I had won enough small victories that I had the mental and practical resources necessary to turn around and tackle the main issue. I couldn't win that main fight at first, but I could pile up some smaller victories and use those smaller victories as a stepping stone to the larger battle. The storm is very real. The problems are there, and the mental health struggles, they're serious. Sometimes you can't get the big win, but finding the small wins often creates the patterns and the habits necessary to bring about those bigger wins down the road. And when you can create that habit of small wins, that's how you take the first practical steps towards the brighter tomorrow. So anyways, that's a little bit of my mental health journey and some of the things that have helped me on my own mental health journey. I'm going to be throwing some links in the video description to some online mental health resources. If you are struggling with mental health issues, please let me be one of the people encouraging you to take the first step in journeying to a better place in terms of your mental health. I have faced some truly traumatic events, but I have also seen some truly amazing outcomes, and I do know that with work and effort that there can be a brighter tomorrow, and it is my hope for anyone who is dealing with mental health issues or for anyone who knows somebody who has mental health issues that people can find resources, find hope, and find their way to a better place. To my entire disaster tour guide community, thank you so much for how wonderful this community has been and for the support that you all provided when I was going through those medical issues. And thank you for the encouragement and appreciation that you show. It truly does mean the world to me. I'm not lying when I say the best part of this job is getting to interact with you. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.